Welcome to The Garden Girl and the Ranch Owner, a heartwarming tale of unexpected love between Cayo Martinez, the wealthy but lonely owner of Green Valley Ranch, and Natalia Ramirez, a humble garden worker with a special gift for healing. When Natalia saves Cayo's beloved horse Apollo, she begins to heal more than just the animal. She awakens Cayo's closed heart. Join us for this journey of love that transcends social barriers and proves that true connection is worth fighting. Before we begin this story, comment below where you're watching from. The morning sun shone brightly over Green Valley Ranch, illuminating the rolling hills and fertile pastures that stretched as far as the eye could see. The sprawling 500-acre property had been in the Martinez family for 3 generations, and now it all belonged to Cayo Martinez. At 30 years old, Cayo stood tall and handsome on the porch of the main house, his dark hair slightly tousled by the breeze, his tanned skin evidence of days spent outdoors. But his eyes, those deep brown eyes that once sparkled with life, now seemed distant, almost empty. "Mr. Martinez, the new temporary workers are here," announced Martha, the housekeeper, who had been with the family since Cayo was a child. Cayo nodded without enthusiasm. "Tell Rodriguez to handle it, I have calls to make." "But sir, you always interview." "Not today, Martha," he interrupted, turning to go back inside. "Not today." Inside his office, Cayo stared at the large portrait of his mother that hung on the wall. Elena Martinez had been the heart of Green Valley Ranch, a woman who understood both business and compassion. Her sudden death 3 years ago had left a hole in Cayo's heart that nothing seemed able to fill. "I'm trying, Mom," he whispered, "but sometimes I don't know why I'm even bothering." Outside, near the entrance to the farm, Natalia Ramirez stood, patiently in line with 5 other workers. At 25, she was small in stature, but carried herself with quiet dignity. Her simple jeans and button-up shirt were clean, but worn. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore no makeup on her sun-kissed face. "Name?" asked Rodriguez, the farm manager, barely looking up from his clipboard. "Natalia Ramirez," she replied softly. "Experience? I've worked in gardens my whole life. I know how to tend vegetables, herbs, and I'm good with animals," she said, her voice gentle but clear. Rodriguez looked up, skeptical. "Animals? We need someone for the garden and chicken coop, not the stables." "I understand," Natalia nodded. "But I was raised by my grandmother who taught me about caring for all living things. Animals, plants, they all need the same thing. Attention and respect." Something in her simple sincerity made Rodriguez pause. "Can you start today?" "Yes, sir. Right now if you need." "Good. Maria will show you where to go," he said, gesturing to an older woman who was waiting nearby. As Natalia followed Maria toward the gardens, they passed the main house. She couldn't help but glance up at the imposing structure, catching a glimpse of a lone figure standing at a window, watching the grounds with what seemed like a heavy gaze. "That's Mr. Martinez," Maria explained, noticing Natalia's look. "He owns everything you see here. Used to be different, more friendly, always joking. But since his mama died," Maria crossed herself. "Now he's like a ghost walking around his own home." Natalia simply nodded. She understood grief. Her grandmother had passed away just last year, leaving Natalia alone in the world. "The garden is here," Maria continued, showing her a large, well-maintained area. "And the chicken coop is just beyond that fence. Tools are in the shed. You'll be working with old Pete. He's been tending these gardens for 20 years, but his joints are getting bad. That's why we needed help." For the next 2 weeks, Natalia worked diligently from sunrise to sunset. She quickly learned the routines of the farm, becoming familiar with every plant in the garden and every chicken in the coop. Old Pete, initially wary of having help, soon came to appreciate her quiet efficiency and knowledge of plants. "Where did you learn about companion planting?" he asked one day, watching as she carefully placed marigolds between tomato plants. "My grandmother," Natalia replied, her hands working the soil with practiced ease. "She said plants are like people. Some get along better than others. Some protect their friends from trouble." Pete nodded appreciatively. "Your grandmother was a wise woman." Each day, Natalia would take her lunch break alone, wandering the fringes of the property to collect herbs and plants that grew wild. She kept them in a small basket, carefully labeled and dried in her tiny room in the workers' quarters. One evening, as she was returning from collecting chamomile flowers, she took a shortcut across the eastern pasture and stopped dead in her tracks. There, lying on his side and breathing heavily, was the most magnificent horse she had ever seen, a gleaming palomino with a coat like gold in the setting sun. Without hesitation, Natalia approached slowly, speaking in soft, soothing tones. "Easy. There, beautiful one. Easy now." The horse's eyes were wide with pain, his flanks trembling. Natalia knelt beside him, gently placing her hand on his neck. She could feel the racing pulse beneath her fingers. "You're in trouble, aren't you?" she whispered, quickly assessing the situation. The horse wasn't visibly injured, but his belly was distended, and he was trying to roll. Classic signs of colic, a dangerous condition for horses that could be fatal if not treated. Natalia looked around frantically but saw no one. Making a quick decision, she ran to the nearest water trough, soaked her scarf and returned to place it on the horse's fevered neck. Then she pulled out her phone, the only luxury she allowed herself, and called the farm office number that all workers had been given. "Emergency in the east pasture," she said when someone answered. "There's a horse down, a palomino. I think it's colic." Without waiting for a response, she hung up and returned her attention to the suffering animal. From her herb basket, she took out peppermint leaves, known to soothe stomach pains, and began to crush them, releasing their strong aroma near the horse's nostrils. "Help is coming," she promised the horse, stroking his neck rhythmically. "Just stay calm, stay with me." The horse's breathing was labored, each exhale a pained groan. Natalia began to sing softly, a lullaby her grandmother had taught her, meant to comfort and heal. 20 minutes passed, and Natalia didn't move from the horse's side, even as the evening air grew cooler and her knees ached from kneeling on the hard ground. She heard the sound of running footsteps approaching but didn't look up, focused entirely on maintaining the connection with the suffering animal. "What happened? What's wrong with him?" a deep, urgent voice demanded. Natalia glanced. She leapt to see a tall man standing over her, Cayo Martinez himself, his face a mask of concern and fear. "Colic, I think," she replied calmly, turning back to the horse. "He needs a vet right away. I've been trying to keep him calm and prevent him from rolling." Cayo knelt on the other side of the horse, his hands trembling slightly as he touched the animal's neck. "Apollo," he said, his voice cracking. "Hold on, boy. You know this horse?" Natalia asked, though she could already see the answer in the man's eyes. "He's mine," Cayo replied simply, but those two words carried a weight of emotion that surprised Natalia. "The vet is on his way. Rodriguez is bringing him directly to this field." For the next hour, they worked together in near silence. Cayo, following Natalia's gentle instructions on how to help keep the horse comfortable. When she suggested walking Apollo slowly once he seemed stable enough to stand, Cayo didn't question her. He simply helped her coax the animal to his feet. The vet arrived and confirmed Natalia's diagnosis, a severe case of colic that could have been fatal if not caught and treated promptly. As the veterinarian administered medication, Cayo stood back, watching intently as Natalia continued to stroke Apollo's neck, whispering words of encouragement. "He'll need to be monitored all night," the vet said finally. "I've given him medication to ease the pain and reduce the inflammation, but the next 12 hours are critical." "I'll stay with him," Cayo said immediately. "So will I," Natalia added. Not looking at Cayo but focusing on the horse, the vet nodded. "I'll be back at dawn to check on him. Call me if anything changes." He handed Cayo a syringe. "If he shows signs of extreme distress again, use this, but only as a last resort." After the vet left, farm hands brought lanterns, water and blankets, setting up a small camp area near Apollo. As the night deepened, most of the workers drifted away, leaving only Cayo, Natalia, and two stable hands who were instructed to fetch anything needed. "You should go rest," Cayo told Natalia around midnight, noticing how she swayed slightly with fatigue. "The stable hands, and I can watch him now." Natalia shook her head. "I'll stay, he knows me now. Animals can sense who's helping them." Cayo studied her in the lantern light, really seeing her for the first time. She wasn't what most would call beautiful in the conventional sense, but there was something about her, a serene presence, an inner strength that seemed to radiate from her very being. "What's your name?" he asked suddenly, realizing he didn't even know who this woman was who had appeared like an angel to save his beloved horse. "Natalia," she replied simply. "Natalia Ramirez. I work in the garden and chicken coop." "How did you know what to do for Apollo? Did you work with horses before?" She shook her head. "My grandmother taught me. She had a way with animals, all creatures really. She could sense their pain, know what they needed." Natalia's voice softened with memory. "She always said that healing isn't just medicine. It's also presence, being there, not giving up." Caio nodded slowly, a flash of emotion crossing his face. "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. My mother used to say something similar. Around 3 a.m., Apollo began to show signs of distress again. Natalia quickly moved to his head, speaking softly into his ear, while Caio hovered anxiously nearby. "Should we use the injection?" Caio asked, worry etched on his face. "Not yet," Natalia said. From her pocket, she withdrew a small pouch. "This is a mixture of chamomile and valerian. It can help calm him." She looked at Caio. "Do you trust me?" Their eyes met in the lantern light, his filled with fear and hope, hers steady and certain. After a moment, Caio nodded. Natalia mixed the herbs with a little water and gently coaxed Apollo to take the mixture. Then she began to massage specific points on his neck and ears, her movements confident and practiced. Gradually, miraculously, Apollo's breathing steadied. The terrible tension in his body began to ease, and by dawn, when the vet returned, the horse was standing calmly, the worst of the crisis past. "I've never seen such a rapid recovery from colic this severe," the vet admitted, examining Apollo with amazement. "Whatever you two did last night saved his life." As the morning sun broke over the horizon, casting golden light across the pasture, Caio turned to thank Natalia, but she was already walking away, her small figure moving quietly toward the gardens where her day's work awaited. "Wait!" he called after her. When she paused and turned, he walked up to her, his face showing the emotional aftermath of the night. Relief, gratitude, and something else, something he hadn't felt in a very long time. "Thank you," he said simply. "Apollo he's all I have left from before, from when things were good." Natalia nodded, understanding the depth of what he wasn't saying. "He's strong. He wants to live." Caio looked back at the horse, now grazing peacefully, as if nothing had happened. When he turned back to Natalia, his eyes were damp. "You saved him," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "and without knowing it, you might have saved me too." Natalia didn't know how to respond to such raw honesty. She simply gave a small smile and continued on her way, unaware that Caio watched her go, a spark rekindling in his heart that had been dormant for years. In the days that followed, something shifted at Green Valley Ranch. Caio, who had been like a shadow on his own property, began to be seen more frequently around the grounds. He started inspecting the gardens where Natalia worked, asking old Pete questions about the harvest, lingering near the chicken coop at times when Natalia would be collecting eggs. The other workers noticed the change, exchanging knowing glances. When Caio would appear, seemingly by coincidence wherever Natalia happened to be working. One afternoon, as Natalia was weeding between rows of lettuce, a shadow fell across her work. She looked up to see Caio standing there, holding 2 glasses of iced tea. "I thought you might be thirsty," he said, offering her a glass. "It's hot today." Surprised, Natalia accepted the drink with soil-stained hands. "Thank you, Mr. Martinez." "Caio," he corrected her, settling down on a nearby bench. "Please call me Caio." They sat in awkward silence for a moment before he spoke again. "Apollo is doing well. The vet says he's completely recovered." Natalia smiled genuinely. "I'm glad. He's a beautiful animal." "He was my mother's," Caio said quietly. "She loved that horse more than anything. When she died, taking care of him was the only thing that kept me going some days." Natalia nodded, understanding the unspoken grief. "Animals can heal us sometimes, just by needing us." "Yes," Caio agreed. looking at her with newfound respect. That's exactly it. He hesitated, then added, I'd like to show you something if you have time after your work today. Curious, Natalia agreed to meet him near the stables at sunset. When she arrived, freshly washed and changed into her cleanest shirt, Caio was waiting with Apollo, now saddled and groomed to a golden shine. I thought you might like to properly meet him, Caio explained. He seems to remember you. Indeed. The magnificent horse nickered softly when Natalia approached, lowering his head to nuzzle her outstretched hand. Hello again, beautiful one, she said softly, stroking his velvety nose. Caio watched them, a smile, perhaps his first genuine smile in years, spreading across his face. He likes you, he said simply. He doesn't warm up to many people. As the sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, Caio showed Natalia around the stables, introducing her to the other horses, telling stories about each one. She listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that revealed her natural understanding of animals. When night began to fall and they walked back toward the workers' quarters, Caio found himself reluctant to end their time together. Natalia, he said as they reached the path that would lead to her quarters, would you be willing to help with the horses sometimes? In addition to your regular duties, of course. I'd adjust your pay accordingly. Her eyes lit up at the prospect. I'd like that very much. Good, he said, suddenly awkward now that their evening was ending. Good. Tomorrow then, she nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. Tomorrow, as Natalia continued to her small room, she couldn't help but feel a flutter of something unfamiliar in her chest. No one had ever looked at her the way Caio Martinez had tonight, like she was someone worth seeing, someone special. Meanwhile, Caio returned to the main house where Martha was waiting with his dinner. You missed 2 calls from Ms. Blackwell, the housekeeper informed him, referring to Victoria Blackwell, the daughter of Caio's business partner, and the woman everyone expected him to eventually marry. I'll call her tomorrow, Caio replied, his mind clearly elsewhere. Martha studied him curiously. For the first time in years, the young master seemed present, alive. You seem different tonight, she observed cautiously. Caio paused, considering her words. Maybe I am, Martha. Maybe I am. Outside, the stars began to appear one by one in the darkening sky, bearing witness to the first fragile beginnings of something neither Caio nor Natalia had been looking for. Something that, like a tender seedling, had been planted in the fertile ground of a simple act of kindness and was now, against all odds, starting to grow. Word spread quickly around Green Valley Ranch about the new garden girl who had saved Apollo, the prized Palomino. The ranch hands whispered about how the boss now visited the gardens daily, bringing Natalia cold drinks or asking her opinion about the herbs she grew with such care. He never paid attention to any worker before, muttered Lena, one of the kitchen staff, as she watched from the window. Caio was showing Natalia something in a leather-bound book, their heads bent close together near the rose garden. It won't last, replied Sophia, the head cook, with a knowing look. Remember who he is and who she is. Besides, Victoria Blackwell called 3 times yesterday. She's coming for the weekend. Victoria Blackwell was the daughter of James Blackwell, Caio's late father's business partner and the second largest investor in Green Valley Ranch. Everyone knew that both families had long hoped for a marriage that would unite their fortunes. Victoria, with her polished appearance and social connections, was exactly the kind of woman someone in Caio's position was expected to marry. Unaware of the gossip, Natalia focused on her new responsibilities. In addition to tending the gardens and chicken coop, she now spent 2 hours each evening helping with the horses, particularly Apollo. The magnificent Palomino had become attached to her, nickering with excitement whenever she approached the stables. He's never taken to anyone like this, Caio remarked one evening, as they brushed Apollo together after a light training session. Not since my mother. Natalia smiled, her hands moving rhythmically across the horse's gleaming coat. Animals know who sees them truly. Your mother must have had a special gift. Caio's expression softened with memory. She did. She could look at a person or animal and somehow see inside them what they needed, what troubled them. He paused, glancing at Natalia with a look that made her heart beat faster. You remind me of her that way. I'm nothing special, Natalia said softly, focusing intently on a tangle in Apollo's mane. "Just what my grandmother taught me." "Your grandmother taught you well," Caio replied. Then, hesitantly, Would you consider having dinner with me tonight? In the main house?" Natalia looked up, surprise evident in her eyes. "Dinner?" "So with you. Nothing formal," he added quickly, misreading her surprise as reluctance. I'd like to talk more, away from work." Before Natalia could answer, they were interrupted by the sound of tires on gravel. A sleek black luxury car was pulling up to the main house. "Caio," called a female voice, musical but commanding. Caio's body tensed. "Victoria," he murmured, almost to himself. "I forgot she was coming today." A tall, elegant woman emerged from the car, her designer outfit immaculate despite the long drive. Her blonde hair was styled perfectly, her makeup flawless. She looked exactly like someone who had never worked a day in her life. "There you are," Victoria called, walking toward the stables with practiced grace, somehow managing not to get her expensive shoes dirty. "I've been calling you all week." Caio straightened, his demeanor subtly shifting. Natalia noticed how his shoulders squared. His expression became more controlled, as if he were putting on a mask. "Victoria, this is a surprise," he said, walking to meet her. "I thought you were coming tomorrow." Victoria air-kissed his cheek, then glanced curiously at Natalia, who had stepped back, busying herself with storing the grooming tools. "Daddy had meetings moved up, so I decided to come early," Victoria explained, linking her arm through Caio's. "I've missed you, darling. You've been so distracted lately." Her eyes flickered to Natalia again. "And who is this?" "This is Natalia Ramirez," Caio said, his voice carefully neutral. "She's been helping with the horses. Natalia, this is Victoria Blackwell." Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "How nice. Well, I won't keep you from your work. Martha said she's preparing something special for dinner, Caio. I brought that wine you like from Daddy's collection." As Victoria led Caio toward the house, he glanced back at Natalia with an apologetic look. "We'll talk tomorrow," he called over his shoulder. Natalia nodded, returning to Apollo, who seemed to sense her sudden sadness. The horse gently nudged her shoulder, and she stroked his nose absently. "It's all right, beautiful one," she murmured. "I know where I belong." For the next 2 days, Natalia saw little of Caio. She caught glimpses of him showing Victoria around the ranch, driving her in his truck to see the new breeding facilities, or sitting with her on the porch of the main house. Victoria's laughter, loud and confident, often drifted across the grounds. On Saturday evening, Natalia was gathering eggs later than usual, having spent extra time with a hen that seemed unwell. As she crossed the yard with her basket, she overheard voices from the open window of Caio's office. "Daddy says we should set a date, Caio," Victoria was saying. "People are starting to talk. The benefit gala would be the perfect time to announce our engagement." "I've never agreed to an engagement, Victoria," came Caio's reply, his voice tight. "Don't be difficult, darling. We've been moving toward this for years. It makes perfect sense. Our families, our businesses. Besides, who else would understand your world? Some local girl who'd be overwhelmed by your position." Natalia hurried past, her cheeks burning, not wanting to hear more. She shouldn't have been listening. Anyway, what Victoria said made sense. Caio Martinez lived in a world completely different from her own. The attention he'd shown her was probably nothing more than gratitude for saving Apollo, combined with kindness. That night, Natalia couldn't sleep. The memory of Caio's invitation to dinner, interrupted by Victoria's arrival, kept replaying in her mind. Had he really been interested in spending time with her, or had she misinterpreted his friendliness? Around midnight, she gave up on sleep and decided to check on the sick hen. Throwing a shawl over her nightdress, she made her way to the chicken coop, the full moon lighting her path. After tending to the hen, who seemed to be improving, Natalia found herself drawn to the stables. She often went there when troubled, finding comfort in the quiet presence of the horses. To her surprise, Apollo's stall was empty. Concerned, she stepped outside and scanned the moonlit pastures. In the distance, she saw a figure on horseback moving slowly along the fence line. The golden coat of the horse gleamed silver in the moonlight, Apollo with Caio on his back. Not wanting to be seen, Natalia started to retreat into the shadows. But Apollo had already caught her scent. The horse whinnied and changed direction, trotting toward her despite Caio's attempts to steer him away. "Natalia," Caio called, recognizing her figure in the moonlight. "What are you doing out so late?" "I was checking on a sick hen," she replied softly as they approached. "Then I wanted to see the horses. I'm sorry if I disturbed your ride." Caio dismounted, leading Apollo the last few steps. In the moonlight, his face looked tired, troubled. "You didn't disturb anything. I couldn't sleep." Natalia nodded, understanding. "Neither could I." They stood in awkward silence for a moment, until Apollo nudged Natalia's shoulder, nearly knocking her off balance. Caio reached out to steady her, his hand warm on her arm. "He missed you," Caio said, not removing his hand. "I missed him too," Natalia replied, looking at the horse rather than meeting Caio's gaze. "Natalia," Caio began hesitantly, "about the other day when Victoria arrived." "I wanted to explain." She shook her head quickly. "There's no need, I understand. Ms. Blackwell is... she seems well suited to your life." Caio's expression hardened slightly. "My life? You mean the life everyone expects me to have? The life that's been planned out since I was born?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "That's not who I am, Natalia. At least not who I want to be." Before she could respond, they heard a voice calling from the direction of the house. "Caio, where are you?" It was Victoria, her voice carrying clearly in the night air. Caio closed his eyes briefly, his jaw tightening. "I should go," he said reluctantly. Natalia nodded, stepping back. "Good night, Mr. Martinez." "Caio," he corrected her gently. "Please, at least when we're alone, call me Caio." As he led Apollo back toward the stables, Victoria appeared at the edge of the yard, elegant even in her nightwear and robe. "There you are, I woke up and you were gone," she called, then noticed Natalia. "Oh, you're with the stable girl." "Garden girl, actually," Natalia corrected quietly, gathering her shawl around her. "Good night." She walked quickly back to the workers' quarters, feeling Victoria's cold stare on her back the entire way. The next morning, Natalia was surprised to find Martha, the housekeeper, waiting for her outside the chicken coop. "Mr. Martinez would like to see you in his office," Martha said, her expression giving nothing away. Natalia's heart sank. Had Victoria complained about their late-night encounter? Was she going to be reassigned? Or worse, let go, with a heavy heart? She washed her hands and followed Martha to the main house. She'd never been inside Caio's office before, though she'd glimpsed it through windows. It was a handsome room with dark wood paneling and shelves filled with books. A large desk dominated the space, and behind it sat Caio, looking more formal than she'd seen him in weeks. "Thank you for coming, Natalia," he said, gesturing for her to take a seat opposite him. "Please close the door, Martha." Once they were alone, Caio's formal demeanor softened somewhat. "I want to apologize for last night. Victoria was less than gracious." "There's no need to apologize," Natalia said. "She was probably surprised to find you talking to an employee in the middle of the night." Caio studied her face for a moment. "Is that how you see yourself, just an employee?" The question caught her off guard. "That's what I am," she replied simply. "And is that all you want to be?" he pressed. Natalia looked down at her hands, work-worn and calloused. "What I want doesn't matter much in the real world, Mr. Martinez." "Caio," he reminded her, then got up from behind the desk and moved to sit in the chair next to hers. "And it matters to me, Natalia. What you want matters to me." She finally met his gaze, her heart thundering in her chest. "Why?" The simple question seemed to reach something deep inside him. "Because no one has made me feel truly seen in years. Not until you." Before Natalia could respond, there was a sharp knock at the door and Victoria entered without waiting for a response. "Caio, darling, we're going to be late for brunch with the Hendersons if we don't..." She stopped, taking in the scene before her. Caio and Natalia sitting close together, the intensity between them palpable. "Oh, I didn't realize you were in a meeting." "I'll go," Natalia said quickly, standing up. Thank you for your time, Mr. Martinez. As she left the room, she heard Victoria's voice, artificially sweet. Was there a problem with the gardens, darling? Natalia didn't hear Caio's response. She hurried back to the safety of her gardens, throwing herself into work to quiet the confusion in her mind and heart. That afternoon, as dark clouds gathered on the horizon promising a summer storm, Natalia overheard a conversation that chilled her to the bone. She was retrieving a trowel she'd left near the rose bushes when Rodriguez, the farm manager, walked past with two of the stable hands. "Poor boss," one of them was saying. "Stuck with the Ice Queen all weekend." Rodriguez chuckled. "Victoria Blackwell. Comes with a big investment check, though, and the boss knows what's expected." "Still," said the other hand, "have you seen how he looks at that garden girl? The one who saved Apollo?" Rodriguez shook his head. "Don't be fooled. Men like Martinez might play around with simple girls like her, but they marry women like Victoria. Blackwell. It's how the world works. So you think he's just having some fun with the girl? What else? Look at her and look at him. Those worlds don't mix, boys. He knows it, even if she doesn't." Their voices faded as they walked away, but their words remained, cutting into Natalia's heart like knives. Was that what everyone thought? That she was just a diversion for Caio, something to pass the time until he followed through with his expected life? Worse, was it true? The storm broke late that evening, rain pouring down in sheets, thunder shaking the buildings. Natalia sat by her small window, watching lightning illuminate the sky, feeling as turbulent inside as the weather outside. She'd been foolish to think someone like Caio Martinez could truly care for someone like her. Foolish to let her heart begin to hope. A knock at her door startled her, probably one of the other workers needing something. She opened it to find Caio standing there, drenched from the rain, his hair plastered to his forehead, his expression intense. "Caio," she gasped. "What are you doing here? Where's Miss Blackwell?" "Gone," he said simply. "She left an hour ago. We had a disagreement." Natalia looked past him, aware that other workers might see him at her door. "You shouldn't be here. People will talk. Let them," he said, his voice low and determined. "I need to talk to you, Natalia. Not as your employer, just as a man who can't stop thinking about you." She hesitated, torn between caution and the pull of her own feelings. Finally, she stepped aside to let him in, closing the door quickly behind him. Her room was small and simple, a bed, a chair, a small table with books and shelves lined with jars of dried herbs. It was spotlessly clean but spare, with nothing decorative except a handmade quilt and a photograph of an elderly woman, her grandmother, on the bedside table. Caio looked around, taking in the humble space, then back at Natalia. In the light of her single lamp, she was beautiful, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, her eyes wide and questioning. "Victoria wants us to announce our engagement at the benefit gala next month," he said without preamble. Natalia's heart sank, but she kept her expression neutral. "Congratulations," she said softly. "I told her no." The simple statement hung in the air between them. Natalia blinked, trying to process what she was hearing. "You refused?" Caio nodded, taking a step closer to her. "I told her I couldn't marry her because my heart is elsewhere." He reached out, gently touching Natalia's cheek. "It's here, Natalia, with you." She wanted to believe him, wanted it more than she'd ever wanted anything. But Rodriguez's words echoed in her mind. "People are saying you're just playing with me," she whispered, voicing her deepest fear. "That men like you might have fun with girls like me, but you don't marry them." Pain and anger flashed across Caio's face. "Is that what you think of me? That I would toy with someone's feelings like that? I don't know what to think," she admitted. "This doesn't make sense. You're Caio Martinez. I'm just—" "Don't," he interrupted, his voice fierce. "Don't say you're just anything. You're everything that matters, Natalia, everything real." Thunder crashed outside and the lights flickered. In the momentary darkness, Caio pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she might disappear. "When my mother died, something in me died too," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I went through the motions of living. I did what was expected. But I wasn't alive, not really." His arms tightened around her. "Not until you knelt in that Failed and saved Apollo, and without even knowing it started to save me too. Natalia's resolve began to crumble, her arms slowly rising to return his embrace. But your world, I don't care about that world, he said fiercely. I care about you. He drew back slightly, looking into her eyes. Victoria accused me of being infatuated with a servant girl. She said I'd get over it, that I'd come to my senses. She doesn't understand that for the first time in years I actually am in my senses. I'm seeing clearly. The lights flickered again, then steadied. In the warm glow, Kaio's eyes shone with emotion. I'm not asking for promises, Natalia. I know this is sudden. I just want a chance to show you that what I feel is real. Natalia looked up at him, torn between hope and fear. I'm afraid, she admitted. Not of you, but of hoping for something that can't last. Kaio touched her cheek gently. The night we saved Apollo together, you told him to stay with you. Now I'm asking the same thing. Stay with me, Natalia. Give us a chance. Outside, the storm began to ease, the thunder moving into the distance. Inside Natalia's small room, another kind of storm was calming, the storm of doubt and fear that had raged in her heart. Slowly, she nodded. Okay, she whispered, one day at a time. Kaio's smile was like sunrise after the longest night. He leaned down, pausing just before his lips met hers, giving her the chance to pull away. Instead, Natalia closed the final distance between them, her lips meeting his, in a kiss that felt like coming home, like finding something precious that had been lost. Neither of them noticed the shadowy figure standing in the rain outside Natalia's window. Victoria Blackwell's eyes narrowed as she watched the couple's embrace, her lips thinning into a line of cold determination. Enjoy it while... It lasts, little garden girl, she whispered. This isn't over, not by a long shot. The morning after the storm dawned clear and brilliant, as if the rain had washed the world clean. Natalia arrived at the gardens earlier than usual, her heart light despite her lack of sleep. The memory of Kaio's kiss lingered on her lips, making her smile as she knelt to check on seedlings damaged by the storm. You look happy this morning, observed old Pete, shuffling over with his worn hat already damp with sweat. Storm didn't keep you up? Natalia blushed slightly. I slept fine, she fibbed, focusing intently on a bent tomato plant. In truth, she'd lain awake for hours after Kaio left, replaying every word, every touch, wondering if tomorrow would change everything. Pete said, unconvinced. Well, just so you know, there's talk. The boss was seen heading to the workers' quarters last night. Natalia's hands stilled. Oh? People have eyes, girl, and tongues that wag too freely. The old gardener's voice held no judgment, only concern. Just be careful. Hearts get broken when different worlds collide. Before she could respond, a commotion near the main house caught their attention. Two sleek cars with tinted windows had pulled up, and men in expensive suits were getting out. One of them was James Blackwell, Victoria's father, his silver hair gleaming in the sun, his face set in stern lines. Board meeting wasn't scheduled. Till next week, Pete muttered. Something's up. Throughout the morning, Natalia tried to focus on her work, but her eyes kept drifting toward the main house. The meeting stretched on for hours. Occasionally, raised voices could be heard, though the words were indistinct. Around noon, Martha hurried across the yard toward the gardens, her usually composed face tight with worry. Natalia, she called. Mr. Martinez wants to see you. In the main office, right away. A knot formed in Natalia's stomach. Is something wrong? Martha glanced back at the house. Just come quickly and brace yourself. With trembling hands, Natalia washed up at the garden tap and followed Martha to the main house. In the entryway, she could hear angry voices from the office, James Blackwell's distinctive baritone rising above the others. This is absolutely unacceptable, Kaio. Your father would be appalled. We had an understanding. My father is gone, came Kaio's voice, tight with controlled anger. And so is any understanding you think existed. Martha knocked on the door, interrupting the heated exchange. Miss Ramirez is here, Mr. Martinez. There was a momentary silence, then Kaio's voice. Send her in, Martha. Natalia entered the office to find a tense standoff. Kaio stood behind his desk, his posture rigid, but his expression softening when he saw her. James Blackwell stood opposite, him red-faced with anger. Victoria sat in a corner chair, her smile coldly triumphant. Two other men, board members, Natalia guessed, looked uncomfortable, like they wished they were anywhere else. "Ah, here she is," said James Blackwell, turning to survey Natalia with open disdain. "The gardener who's caused all this trouble." Natalia straightened her shoulders, refusing to be intimidated despite her simple work clothes and the soil still embedded under her fingernails. "I'm not sure what trouble you're referring to, sir." "Don't play innocent," Victoria cut in. "You know exactly what you've done, worming your way into Kayo's life, manipulating him when he was vulnerable." "That's enough, Victoria." Kayo's voice cracked like a whip. He moved around the desk to stand beside Natalia. "I asked Natalia here because she deserves to hear this directly, not through ranch gossip." He looked down at her, his eyes gentle despite the tension in the room. "Mr. Blackwell is threatening to withdraw his investment in Green Valley unless I agree to certain personal arrangements." James Blackwell cleared his throat. "It's a simple business decision. Your recent behavior raises questions about your judgment, Kayo. The Blackwell family cannot continue to invest in an operation where the leadership is making questionable personal choices. What Mr. Blackwell means," Victoria added with false sweetness, "is that Daddy can't keep his money in a ranch where the owner is sleeping with the help." Natalia felt as if she'd been slapped. "That's not... It doesn't matter what is or isn't happening," James interrupted. "Perception is reality in business, and the perception of you two together is damaging to the ranch's reputation and, by extension, to my family's interests." Kayo's jaw clenched. "So you're giving me an ultimatum? End my relationship with Natalia or lose your investment." "I'm merely pointing out consequences," James replied smoothly. "Your father and I built this ranch together with certain expectations about its future. That included a merger of our families through you and Victoria. Now, if you choose to throw that away for this," he gestured dismissively at Natalia, "then yes, I'll have to protect my interests." Natalia felt sick. She looked up at Kayo, saw the conflict raging behind his eyes, and made a decision. "I should go," she said quietly. "This is between you all, it's not my place." Kayo caught her hand as she turned to leave. "No, this concerns you too, Natalia." He faced the board members directly. "Gentlemen, I'd like a moment alone with Mr. Blackwell and his daughter. We'll continue our discussion afterward." The board members seemed relieved to escape the tension, filing out quickly. When the door closed behind them, Kayo didn't release Natalia's hand. "What you're doing is blackmail, James," he said calmly. "Business," James countered. "Your father would understand." "My father," Kayo replied, his voice tight, "married my mother against his family's wishes because he loved her. They gave him the same ultimatums you're giving me now. He chose love, built this place with his own hands, and only accepted your investment years later when you came to him." James looked momentarily thrown, as if this version of history didn't match his own. "That's not..." "It is," Kayo interrupted. "My mother told me the whole story before she died. How my father's family disowned him for marrying Elena Suarez, the daughter of Mexican immigrants who worked on their land. How you only came around with your friendship and your money after the ranch was already successful." He smiled grimly. "History repeats itself, it seems." Victoria stood up, her composure slipping. "This is ridiculous. You're comparing this gardener to your mother? Your mother was educated, cultured." "My mother," Kayo cut in, "was kind. She had integrity. She saw people for who they truly were." He looked at Natalia with such tenderness that her heart seemed to stop. "Just..." Like Natalia, James Blackwell's face had gone from red to purple. "You're making a mistake that will cost you everything, boy. Without my investment, this ranch will be in serious financial trouble within a year." Kayo nodded, accepting this. "Perhaps, but I'd rather rebuild from nothing with someone real at my side than live a lie with all the money in the world." He looked directly at Victoria. "I'm sorry if I ever gave you the impression that we had a future together. It wasn't fair to you." Victoria's perfect facade finally cracked. "You'll regret this," she hissed, grabbing her designer purse. "Both of you will. My father will bury this ranch, and your little romance won't survive the fallout. She'll leave." When things get hard, they always do. With that, she stormed out, leaving the door open behind her. James Blackwell looked between Caio and Natalia, his expression cold. "You have 1 week to reconsider before I withdraw my investment and call in my loans," he said flatly. "For your father's sake, I hope you come to your senses." He followed his daughter out, his expensive shoes clicking angrily on the hardwood floor. When they were alone, Natalia finally found her voice. "Caio, you can't do this. Not for me, it's your family's legacy." "A legacy built on love, not compromise," he replied, turning to face her fully. "My father chose love over money once. I'm just following his example. But the ranch, your livelihood. We'll figure it out," he said simply, taking both her hands in his. Unless you don't want this. If you're not ready for what this means, for the challenges we'll face, I understand. You didn't ask for any of this." Natalia looked up at him, this man who was willing to risk everything for her. Fear and doubt warred with the undeniable feelings in her heart. "People will talk," she whispered. "They'll say terrible things about me, about us." "Let them," he said fiercely. "The only voices that matter are ours." He brought her hands to his lips, kissing them gently, dirt under the nails and all. "I'm not asking for forever right now, Natalia, just for today and then tomorrow. 1 day at a time, remember?" She nodded slowly, finding her courage. 1 day at a time. The news spread through Green Valley Ranch like wildfire. By dinner, everyone knew that James Blackwell had stormed out, that Victoria had been in tears, and that Caio Martinez had chosen the garden girl over the ranch's biggest investor. Reactions were mixed. Some of the older ranch hands shook their heads, predicting disaster. Others, who remembered Caio's parents and their own against-the-odds love story, were more supportive. "History doesn't just repeat," Martha said cryptically as she served Caio. His dinner that night, the first time he'd eaten alone in the main house since the confrontation. Sometimes it rhymes. The next morning, Natalia arrived at the gardens to find her co-workers treating her differently, some with newfound respect, others with barely concealed resentment. Old Pete, however, just handed her a trowel with a knowing smile. "About time someone shook things up around here," was all he said. Around mid-morning, Caio appeared in the garden dressed in work clothes rather than his usual business attire. "Walk with me?" he asked Natalia, oblivious to the stares of the other workers. They walked in comfortable silence to a hilltop overlooking the entire ranch. The view was breathtaking. Pastures stretching to the horizon, horses grazing peacefully, the garden's colorful patches visible near the main house. "My father proposed to my mother on this spot," Caio said as they sat on a weather-worn bench. He told her that everything they could see would be built together, not given or inherited. Natalia listened, sensing there was more to the story. "I've been going through old records since Blackwell left yesterday," Caio continued. "Things my father kept that I never bothered to look at before. Letters, contracts, journals." He shook his head, amazed. "All these years I thought Blackwell was essential to Green Valley's survival, but my father was smarter than that." "What do you mean?" "He never gave Blackwell controlling interest, no matter how much money he invested, and he set up a separate corporation for the horse breeding program, the most profitable part of our operation. Blackwell has no stake in that at all." Caio smiled, pride in his voice. "My father protected his legacy better than I realized." Hope flickered in Natalia's chest. "So the ranch won't fail without him?" "It won't be easy," Caio admitted. "We'll need to make changes, find new investors, maybe scale back some operations temporarily. But we'll survive." He took her hand. "We'll rebuild if we have to, just like my parents did." For the next few days, Caio threw himself into saving the ranch. He spent hours on the phone with other investors, met with the board to outline a new financial strategy, and even reached out to competitors about possible partnerships. Many nights he worked until dawn, falling asleep at his desk surrounded by paperwork. Natalia continued her regular duties, but also began spending evenings in the main house, bringing Caio dinner when he forgot to eat, listening as he explained his plans, offering simple but insightful suggestions that often made him see problems from new angles. On the fourth night, as she gently woke him from where he'd fallen asleep over financial projections, he looked up at her with tired eyes. Move in here, he said suddenly. Not as an employee, not as a guest, as the woman I'm building a future with. Natalia hesitated. Caio, it's too soon. People would talk even more than they already are. I don't care, he insisted, taking her hand. Life is too short to worry about what others think. My mother used to say that. I didn't understand it until now. Still, Natalia was cautious. Let's wait a little longer, until things settle with the ranch, with Blackwell. The reminder of James, Blackwell's ultimatum sobered Caio. He'll make his move soon. His week is almost up. As if on cue, the phone rang. It was after midnight, so a call could only mean trouble. Caio answered, his expression growing darker as he listened. I see, he said finally. Thank you for the warning, John. He hung up and looked at Natalia, his face grim. That was John Davis, one of the board members. Blackwell isn't just pulling his investment. He's calling in all his loans immediately and pressuring other investors to do the same. He's trying to force the ranch into bankruptcy. Natalia felt sick. Can he do that? Legally? Yes. Ethically? No. But that's never stopped James Blackwell before. Caio ran a hand through his hair in frustration. He's also spreading rumors about you, about us, to anyone who will listen, trying to make it sound like you're after my money, like you've manipulated me. Anger flashed in Natalia's eyes. I've never asked you for anything. I know, Caio said softly, pulling her close. And that's exactly why I love you. The words hung in the air between them, the first time he'd said it directly. Natalia's heart seemed to stop, then race forward. You love me? She whispered. I do, he said simply. I think I have since the moment I saw you in that field with Apollo, giving everything you had to save him without thought of reward. He cupped her face gently. I know it's fast. I know the timing is terrible, but it's true. Natalia stood on tiptoe and kissed him softly. I love you too, she admitted, and it terrifies me. Caio held her tightly, as if she might slip away. We'll get through this. Whatever Blackwell throws at us, we'll face it together. The next morning, they woke to the sound of a helicopter landing on the ranch's helipad, a rare occurrence usually reserved for major business partners or emergencies. Caio hurried downstairs, Natalia following cautiously behind him. To their shock, it was Eduardo Martinez, Caio's uncle and his father's younger brother, who strode into the main house like he owned it. Eduardo was a successful businessman who had distanced himself from the family years ago, moving to Argentina to build his own empire. Nephew, Eduardo greeted Caio with a tight smile. It seems you've been having some difficulties. Caio stiffened. Uncle Eduardo, this is unexpected. Eduardo's gaze flickered to Natalia, who hung back uncertainly. And this must be the young lady I've been hearing so much about, the one who's caused such a stir. Before Caio could respond defensively, Eduardo surprised them both by smiling warmly at Natalia. The one who saved Apollo, yes? Elena's beloved horse? I'd like to thank you for that. My sister-in-law loved that animal more than she loved most. People. Confused by this reaction, Caio invited his uncle into the office for coffee. Natalia excused herself, sensing they needed privacy, but Eduardo stopped her. Please stay, Miss Ramirez. What I have to say concerns you as well. Once they were settled with coffee, Eduardo got straight to the point. James Blackwell called me yesterday, spinning quite a tale about how you've been bewitched by a gold digger and are driving the ranch into the ground. Caio started to object, but Eduardo held up a hand. I've known James for 30 years. I know when he's manipulating a situation. He leaned back, studying Natalia with interest. I'd like to hear your side of the story, both of you. For the next hour, Caio explained everything, from Apollo's colic to the ultimatum Blackwell had. Delivered. Natalia spoke little, but when she did, her words were honest and direct, without pretense or calculation. When they finished, Eduardo nodded thoughtfully. You remind me of someone, Miss Ramirez. Who? Natalia asked. My sister-in-law, Lena. She had the same authenticity, the same way of seeing through nonsense to what really matters. He turned to Caio. Your father faced the same choice you're facing now. His family threatened to disown him if he married Elena, Only I supported him. I never knew that, Caio said softly. Miguel and I agreed never to speak of it. He didn't want you to think poorly of your grandparents, who eventually came around once they met Elena. Eduardo smiled sadly. History does have a way of repeating itself in families. He reached into his jacket and pulled out several documents. I've been looking for an investment opportunity in the States. Green Valley Ranch seems perfect, especially if Blackwell is leaving a gap to fill. Caio stared at his uncle in disbelief. You want to invest in the ranch? I want to invest in you, Eduardo corrected. In what you're building here, in the legacy my brother started. His eyes crinkled with a smile, and perhaps a little in love. I'm a romantic at heart, though don't spread that around in business circles. Relief and gratitude swept through Caio. Uncle, I don't know what to say. Say nothing. Just sign these papers accepting my investment, which comes with no strings attached regarding your personal life. Eduardo winked at Natalia. Except perhaps an invitation to the wedding, whenever that may be. Natalia blushed deeply, but Caio reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. That can be arranged, he said, looking at her with such love that it took her breath away. After Eduardo left with promises to return soon to discuss business details, Caio pulled Natalia into his arms. My uncle likes you, he said, amazed. Sure, he never likes anyone. He seems to like you, she replied, still processing everything that had happened. He likes what he sees in us together, Caio corrected. Just like my mother would have, I think. That afternoon, while Caio was on the phone sharing the good news with the board, Natalia decided to check on Apollo. The beautiful Palomino had become a symbol of their beginning, and she found comfort in his gentle presence. As she approached the stables, she noticed a sleek car parked nearby that she didn't recognize. Cautious after recent events, she slowed her pace. From inside the stable came voices, a man's she didn't recognize and Rodriguez, the farm manager. I'm telling you, it's the perfect time, the stranger was saying. Martinez is distracted with all this Blackwell drama and his new girlfriend. He won't notice a missing horse for at least a day, maybe more. This is crazy, Rodriguez replied, though he sounded more nervous than opposed. Apollo is his prized stallion. He'll call the police. By then, the horse will be across the state line. My buyer doesn't care where it comes from. He just wants a champion Palomino for his daughter's birthday, and he's willing to pay cash, lots of it. Natalia's blood ran cold. They were planning to steal Apollo. Tonight. She backed away silently, then turned and ran toward the main house. She had to warn Caio, but as she rounded the corner of the stables, she collided with Victoria Blackwell. Well, well, Victoria said, grabbing Natalia's arm to prevent her escape. If it isn't the little garden witch herself, eavesdropping, were we? Let me go, Natalia demanded, trying to pull free. I need to speak to Caio. Victoria's grip tightened painfully. About the horse thieves my father hired? I don't think so. Shock rendered Natalia momentarily speechless. Your father is behind this. Not officially, of course, Victoria smirked, but he knows how much that stupid horse means to Caio. It's just business, making the loss personal. It's criminal, Natalia said, still struggling. And I'm going to tell Caio right now. Victoria's expression hardened. No, you're not. She nodded to someone behind Natalia. Take her somewhere quiet until the job is done. Before Natalia could scream, a hand clamped over her mouth and something hard hit the back of her head. The world swam, then went black. When she regained consciousness, she was in a small shed far from the main buildings. Her head throbbed, and her hands were tied in front of her. It was nearly dark outside, visible through the shed's single dirty window. Apollo, she thought frantically. They were going to steal Apollo tonight. And no one knew. She looked around desperately for something to help her escape. The shed contained old gardening equipment, including pruning shears hanging on a nail just within reach. Stretching painfully, she managed to grab them and began sawing awkwardly at the ropes on her wrists. It seemed to take forever, but finally the ropes gave way. Her wrists bleeding from the rough treatment, Natalia forced open the shed door and ran into the gathering darkness, praying she wasn't too late. The main house was lit up, and she could see people moving about inside. Caio hosting a celebration. Dinner for the board members. unaware of the danger to his beloved horse. The stables, however, were ominously dark and quiet. Natalia changed direction, running directly for the stables. As she approached, she saw two figures leading a horse toward a trailer parked behind the building, away from the view of the main house. The horse was Apollo, his golden coat unmistakable even in the dim light. Without thinking of her own safety, Natalia ran forward, shouting at the top of her lungs, "Stop! Thieves! Help!" The men turned, startled by her sudden appearance. One of them cursed and dropped Apollo's lead rope to run toward her. The horse, sensing danger, reared up, front hooves pawing the air. Natalia dodged the approaching man, continuing to yell for help while trying to reach Apollo. The commotion caused the horse to panic further, breaking free and galloping away from both the men and the trailer. "Grab her," one man shouted, "and shut her up before someone hears." Natalia found herself cornered between the stable wall and the two angry thieves. She looked around frantically for a weapon, for an escape route, for anything. "You should have stayed tied up in that shed," one of the men growled, advancing on her. Suddenly Apollo reappeared, charging directly toward them. The men scattered to avoid the powerful animal, giving Natalia the opening she needed. She ran toward the main house, screaming Caio's name. Lights began to come on across the property. She could hear Caio's voice calling back, doors opening, people emerging to see what the commotion was about. One of the thieves caught up to her, grabbing her arm and spinning her around. "You've ruined everything," he snarled, raising his fist. Before he could strike, a golden blur crashed into him from the side. Apollo had returned, knocking the man to the ground with a powerful shoulder, then standing protectively over Natalia, ears flattened against his head, teeth bared. The second thief took one look at the enraged stallion and fled toward the trailer. By then, Caio and several ranch hands had arrived, quickly surrounding the remaining thief. "Natalia," Caio pushed past everyone to reach her, pulling her into his arms. "What happened? Are you hurt?" Breathlessly, she explained about overhearing. The plot to steal Apollo, about Victoria's involvement, about being knocked unconscious and tied up in the shed. Caio's face darkened with fury. "Call the sheriff," he ordered one of the hands, "and make sure that man doesn't go anywhere." He turned back to Natalia, gently examining the bump on her head and her raw, bleeding wrists. "We need to get you to a doctor." "I'm okay," she insisted, though she winced when his fingers brushed the knot on her head. "Apollo saved me, again." As if understanding his name, the Palomino nudged Natalia's shoulder gently. Caio looked at his horse with newfound appreciation. "He knows who his real friends are," he said softly, then looked deeply into Natalia's eyes. "So do I." Later that night, after the sheriff had taken the captured thief away and Natalia's injuries had been tended to, they sat together on the porch of the main house, watching the stars appear one by one in the velvet sky. "The thief confessed everything," Caio told her. "He implicated Victoria and James Blackwell. They'll both face charges." Natalia leaned against his shoulder, exhausted but relieved. "I was so afraid they would take Apollo, that I wouldn't be able to stop them." "Oh, you did stop them," Caio said, his arm tightening around her. "You risked your life to save my horse, again." He kissed her temple gently. "You know what this means, don't you?" She looked up at him questioningly. "It means I'm completely, hopelessly in love with you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "And I'm never letting you go." Under the watchful stars, with Apollo grazing peacefully nearby, Caio sealed this promise with a kiss that felt like forever. But in the shadows beyond the ranch, Victoria Blackwell sat in her car, watching the couple. Through binoculars, her face twisted with hate. "Enjoy it while it lasts," she whispered. "This isn't over, not until I say it's over." 6 months had passed since the attempted theft of Apollo, and Green Valley Ranch was thriving. Eduardo Martinez's investment had not only saved the ranch, but had expanded its operations. The horse breeding program, once a secondary focus, had become the ranch's crown jewel, with Apollo standing at its center. Life had settled into a happy rhythm for Caio and Natalia. She had finally agreed to move into the main house, though she insisted on keeping her position overseeing the gardens, now expanded to include medicinal herbs that she used in caring for the animals. On a crisp autumn morning, Caio found Natalia in what everyone now called her garden, a special section filled with healing plants, arranged in concentric circles around a small stone bench. She was kneeling beside a rabbit with an injured paw, gently applying a poultice of herbs. "There you go," she murmured to the small creature. "You'll feel better soon." Kaio watched her, his heart swelling with love. 6 months together had only deepened his feelings for this remarkable woman who approached every living thing with such tenderness and respect. "You have a gift," he said, making his presence known. Natalia looked up with a smile that still took his breath away. "Good morning, I didn't hear you coming." "You were focused," he replied, sitting beside her on the grass, "like always when you're healing something." The rabbit, sensing it was in good hands, remained still as Natalia finished wrapping its paw with a strip of soft cloth. "He got caught in one of the old traps at the edge of the property," she explained. "I've asked Rodriguez to have them all removed. No animal should suffer like that." Kaio nodded. "I'll make sure it happens today." He watched as she gently placed the rabbit in a small cage, lined with soft straw. "Will he be okay?" "A few days' rest, some of my grandmother's special salve, and—" "He'll be fine," she assured him, washing her hands in a nearby basin. "Just like all of us, he just needs someone to care." Kaio took her freshly washed hands in his. "I have something to ask you." She turned to face him fully, her expression curious. "What is it?" For once, the confident businessman looked nervous. "You know about the ranch's annual harvest festival next weekend?" When she nodded, he continued. "This year, it falls exactly on the anniversary of the day you saved Apollo, the day that changed everything for me." Natalia smiled softly at the memory. "Has it been a year already?" "A year that feels like both a lifetime and a heartbeat," he said, his voice growing serious. "I've been thinking about the perfect moment for this, and I realized there's no time more right than now here in your garden, where you work your small miracles every day." Before Natalia could process what was happening, Kaio knelt before her, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "Natalia Ramirez," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion shining in his eyes. "You saved more than my horse that day. You saved me. You showed me what real strength looks like, not power or money, but kindness, integrity, and courage." He opened the box, revealing a ring with a single perfect emerald surrounded by small diamonds. "Will you marry me?" Tears filled Natalia's eyes as she looked at the man kneeling before her. This man who had risked everything to be with her, who had seen her worth when she was just a garden girl with dirt under her nails. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Kaio. I will marry you." His face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the emerald catching the morning light with a flash of brilliant green. "It was my mother's," he explained. "She told me before she died to give it only to someone who made me feel the way my father made her feel, like the best version of myself." Natalia looked at the ring through her tears. "It's beautiful and meaningful." She touched his face gently. "Are you sure?" "There will be talk." "Let them talk," he said firmly, rising to pull her into his arms. "All that matters is that we know what we have is real." Their kiss was interrupted by the sound of applause. They turned to find Martha standing at the garden entrance, wiping tears from her eyes with her apron. "Don't mind me," the housekeeper said, beaming. "I just came to say breakfast is ready, but this is much better than pancakes." Word of the engagement spread through the ranch like wildfire. By lunchtime, everyone from the stable hands to the office staff had found reasons to walk past the gardens, offering congratulations to a blushing Natalia. Old Pete brought her a bouquet of wildflowers. "About time," he said gruffly. "The boss has been walking around with that ring box for weeks, working up his nerve." In the evening, Kaio hosted an impromptu celebration dinner for the ranch staff in the main house, something that had never happened in the ranch's history. As Natalia looked around the table at the smiling faces of people who had once been just her co-workers, but were now becoming family, she felt a happiness she'd never thought possible. After dinner, Kaio pulled her aside. "I know we just got engaged, but I was thinking, why wait? What if we get married at the Harvest Festival next weekend? The whole community will be here already." My uncle Eduardo can fly in. It would be perfect. Natalia's eyes widened. So soon, but there's so much to plan. Martha and the staff are already excited to help. Nothing extravagant, just simple and meaningful, like you. He squeezed her. And unless you want more time? Looking into his hopeful eyes, Natalia found she couldn't imagine waiting either. The harvest festival would be perfect, she agreed, her heart full. The week that followed was a whirlwind of preparations. The ranch hands built an arbor near Natalia's garden where the ceremony would take place. Martha coordinated with the local bakery for a wedding cake. The women from the kitchen staff helped Natalia alter a simple white dress they'd found in town. 3 days before the wedding, Eduardo Martinez arrived with his wife and teenage daughter, bringing wedding gifts and more good news. The investors he'd brought in were so impressed with the ranch's operations that they wanted to expand further, potentially making Green Valley the premier horse breeding facility in the state. We'll discuss business after the wedding, Eduardo insisted when Caio tried to talk details. This week is for celebration, not balance sheets. The evening before the harvest festival, Natalia sat on the porch with Maria, one of the oldest workers on the ranch, who had become something of a surrogate grandmother to her. Are you nervous, child? Maria asked, noticing Natalia's distant expression. Not about marrying Caio, Natalia replied honestly, but about everything else, being the mistress of Green Valley, meeting business associates, hosting events. She twisted her engagement ring anxiously. I don't know anything about that world. Maria patted her hand reassuringly. You know about what matters, caring for things, helping them grow. The rest is just details you can learn. The older woman's eyes twinkled. Besides, Mrs. Elena, Caio's mother, she started just like you, an outsider. But she became the heart of this place. You will too. Natalia was about to respond when a ranch hand rushed up to the porch, his face worried. Miss Natalia, come quick, something's wrong with Apollo. Her heart dropping, Natalia hurried to the stables, where she found the beautiful Palomino lying in his stall, breathing heavily, his golden coat damp with sweat. What happened? She asked the stable boy, who was hovering anxiously nearby. Don't know, ma'am. He was fine at dinner, then just started acting strange about an hour ago. Got restless, then lay down, won't get up now. Natalia knelt beside the horse, her hands running expertly over his body, checking his pulse, his temperature, his breathing. Her fingers found a small puncture mark on his neck, barely visible. A chill ran through her. This wasn't natural illness. This was deliberate. Get Dr. Wilson, she ordered, naming the ranch's veterinarian. Tell him it's an emergency, then find Mr. Martinez. As the stable boy ran to make the calls, Natalia's mind worked frantically. The puncture suggested an injection, poison perhaps. She needed to act quickly. From her pocket, she pulled a small pouch of herbs she always carried, a habit from her days with her grandmother. Working quickly, she mixed a paste with water from Apollo's trough, then gently coaxed the horse to take it, whispering soothingly in his ear the whole time. Stay with me, beautiful one, she murmured, stroking his neck. Don't leave us now. She was so focused on the horse that she didn't notice the figure watching from the shadows of the stable, not until Victoria Blackwell stepped into the dim light, a cold smile on her perfect face. It won't help, Victoria said calmly. What I gave him is quite potent, a specialty drug that leaves no trace in the bloodstream after death. It'll look like natural causes, perhaps a heart attack. Natalia froze, then slowly stood to face the woman who had caused so much trouble already. Why? Haven't you done enough? Victoria's laugh was brittle. Enough? Your little romance with Caio cost my family millions. It humiliated me in front of everyone who matters. And now you're going to marry him? Her eyes hardened. I don't think so. The sheriff already knows about your involvement in the attempted theft, Natalia said, trying to keep Victoria talking while figuring out how to get help. You're only making things worse for yourself. My father's lawyers took care of those charges. Victoria dismissed with a wave of her manicured hand. Money solves most problems. But you're a problem money can't solve, at least not directly. Her smile widened. But I know what Caio loves most in this world. After you. This horse. And when Apollo dies tragically the night before your wedding, well, Caio will be devastated. And that makes you happy? Natalia asked, genuinely bewildered by such cruelty. What would make me happy is watching your relationship fall apart, Victoria replied coldly. Grief does strange things to people. Caio might blame you. After all, you're supposed to be the miracle worker with animals, aren't you? Or he might pull away, become cold again like he was after his mother died. Either way, that perfect little life you've been building will crumble. Behind her, Apollo groaned in pain. Natalia felt torn between confronting Victoria and tending to the suffering animal. What did you give him? She demanded. Tell me, and maybe there's still time to save him. Victoria smiled. Even if I told you, it wouldn't matter. There's no antidote. She glanced at her expensive watch. I should go. I have an alibi to establish in town. Goodbye, Natalia. Enjoy your ruined wedding. As Victoria turned to leave, Natalia made a split-second decision. She lunged forward, grabbing Victoria's designer purse and emptying its contents onto the stable floor. What are you doing? Victoria shrieked, trying to snatch her belongings back. Among the scattered makeup and keys was a small vial with clear liquid and a used syringe. Natalia grabbed them both, backing away from Victoria's reaching hands. Give those back, Victoria demanded, her perfect composure finally cracking. That's private property. This is evidence, Natalia replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Of attempted animal cruelty, at minimum. Maybe attempted sabotage of $1 million breeding program. Victoria's face contorted with rage. She rushed at Natalia, who quickly sidestepped, causing Victoria to crash into a stable wall. Before the woman could recover, Natalia dashed outside, calling for help at the top of her lungs. She nearly collided with Caio, who was running toward the stables with Dr. Wilson and several ranch hands close behind. Apollo's been poisoned, Natalia gasped, holding up the vial and syringe. Victoria Blackwell, she's still in there, but when they entered the stable, Victoria was gone, having fled through the back door. Apollo, however, was still fighting for his life, his breathing increasingly labored. Dr. Wilson examined the vial Natalia had recovered. This is serious, he said grimly. It's a synthetic compound that attacks the heart muscle. We need to get him to the clinic immediately for supportive care and to try to flush it from his system. Will he make it? Caio asked, kneeling beside his beloved horse, his face etched with worry. The vet's expression was grave. I can't promise anything. If we'd found him an hour later. He glanced at Natalia. Whatever you gave him might have slowed the poison's progress. That gives us a fighting chance. The next hours were a blur of activity. Apollo was carefully loaded into a trailer and rushed to the veterinary clinic in town. The sheriff was called. The empty vial and syringe turned over as evidence. Ranch hands searched the property for Victoria, but she had vanished. Natalia and Caio spent the night at the clinic, watching over Apollo as Dr. Wilson and his team worked tirelessly to save him. By dawn, the horse's condition had stabilized, though he remained critically ill. He's fighting, Doctor. Wilson told them as the sun rose. That's a good sign. The next 12 hours will tell us more. Exhausted and emotionally drained, Caio and Natalia sat together in the clinic's small waiting room, holding hands in silence. I'm sorry, Caio finally said. This is my fault. If I hadn't gotten involved with Victoria in the first place. Stop, Natalia interrupted gently. You can't blame yourself for her actions. She made her own choices. The harvest festival, our wedding, Caio began, his voice heavy with regret. Can wait, Natalia finished for him. Apollo is what matters now. He looked at her with tender gratitude. You're amazing, do you know that? Any other bride would be furious about postponing her wedding day. She smiled tiredly. I'm not any other bride, and this isn't about a party or a ceremony. It's about family. Apollo is family. Caio pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. I love you more than I can say. They dozed together in the uncomfortable waiting room chairs, waking every time Dr. Wilson came to give updates. By midday, the news was cautiously positive. Apollo was responding to treatment, his vital signs improving hour by hour. Around 2 in the afternoon, Martha arrived at the clinic with fresh clothes for them both and news from the ranch. The sheriff found Victoria Blackwell at the airport, trying to board a private jet, she reported. They arrested her for animal cruelty and criminal mischief. Her father is raising holy hell, but the evidence is solid. What about the Harvest Festival? Caio asked, suddenly remembering that hundreds of guests would be arriving at the ranch that afternoon. Eduardo and Maria are handling everything, Martha assured him. The festival will go on, just without the wedding. Everyone understands. Natalia squeezed Caio's hand. See, it's all working out. By evening, Dr. Wilson was confident enough in Apollo's progress to send them home for proper rest, promising to call immediately if anything changed. Reluctantly, they returned to the ranch, where the Harvest Festival was in full swing. Lanterns hung from trees, lighting the grounds with a warm glow. Music played from a small stage where local musicians performed. The delicious smell of barbecue and fresh-baked pies filled the air. Despite the postponed wedding, the mood was festive and warm. Eduardo met them at the main house. "How is Apollo?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. "Fighting," Caio replied. "The doctor is cautiously optimistic." Eduardo nodded, satisfied. "Good. That horse has the same stubborn spirit as his owner." He glanced toward the festivities. "Everyone's been asking about you two. They're worried, of course, but also they want to help somehow." Natalia, looking out at the gathering, ranch workers and their families, neighbors, business associates all mingling together, was struck by an idea. "Maybe they can help," she said slowly. "Maybe we all can." She turned to Caio, a new light in her tired eyes. "Your mother believed in the healing power of community, didn't she? Of people coming together?" Caio nodded, puzzled but intrigued. "She did. She always said that love was the strongest medicine." "Then let's use that," Natalia said, her mind racing. "Not just for Apollo, but for us, for everyone." Within an hour, word had spread through the festival. As the sunset painted the sky in breathtaking colors, people gathered around the arbor that had been built for the wedding, forming a large circle. Caio and Natalia stood in the center, hands joined, faces glowing in the light of hundreds of candles that the guests held. "We were supposed to be celebrating our wedding today," Caio addressed the crowd, his voice clear in the evening air. "Instead, we're fighting for the life of a horse that means the world to us. But looking around at all of you, friends, family, neighbors, I realize that today can still be about love and healing." Maria, the oldest worker on the ranch, stepped forward. "In the old traditions," she said, her weathered face solemn, "when someone or something was in danger, the community would gather to send their strength, their prayers, their love. It created a circle of protection." Eduardo, standing with his wife and daughter, nodded in agreement. "In my country, too, we believe in the power of shared intention." One by one, people spoke, sharing stories of Apollo, of Caio and Natalia's journey together, of hopes for healing and new beginnings. As the stars appeared in the darkening sky, the circle of light grew stronger, a beacon of communal love. In the middle of this remarkable gathering, Caio turned to Natalia, his eyes shining with tears and determination. "I don't want to wait," he said simply. "Life is too unpredictable, too precious. I want to marry you now, here, surrounded by all these people who care about us." Natalia looked around at the circle of faces illuminated by candlelight, faces of people who had become her family over the past year. She was still in her everyday clothes. There was no music, no fancy cake, no traditional ceremony, and yet it felt absolutely right. "Yes," she whispered, "now is perfect." A murmur of surprise and delight ran through the crowd as word spread. The local minister, who had been invited to the original ceremony, stepped forward with a broad smile. "I believe I'm still needed then." With no rehearsal, no formal attire, and only the stars and candles for decoration, Caio and Natalia exchanged their vows in the center of the healing circle. Their words were simple but profound, promises to walk together through whatever life brought, joy or sorrow, abundance or hardship, health or illness. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up seemed to reach the heavens themselves. As Caio kissed his bride, the candles around them flickered as one, as if carrying their love outward to touch Apollo wherever he was. The celebration that followed was unlike any wedding reception Green Valley had ever seen. There was dancing, beneath the stars, food shared from the harvest tables, and a sense of community that transcended social barriers. Ranch hands and business executives, kitchen staff and society friends, all celebrated together as equals, united by their care for the newly married couple. Near midnight, as the festivities continued, Caio's phone rang. The crowd fell silent as he answered, Natalia clutching his hand tightly. After a brief conversation, Caio turned to the waiting guests, his face breaking into a smile of pure joy. Apollo has turned the corner, he announced. Dr. Wilson says he's going to make it. The cheer that erupted was even louder than the one that had followed their wedding vows. Natalia felt tears of relief and happiness streaming down her face as Caio lifted her in his arms, spinning her around in celebration. Our circle worked, Maria declared, nodding wisely. Love always finds a way. In the days that followed, Apollo continued to improve, eventually returning to his stall at Green Valley Ranch, where he was pampered like the hero he was. Victoria Blackwell faced criminal charges that even her father's money couldn't make disappear, especially after the attempted theft 6 months earlier came to light again. Green Valley Ranch flourished under the combined leadership of Caio and Natalia Martinez. Eduardo's investment brought new opportunities, and Natalia's natural healing methods for the animals became famous throughout the region, drawing visitors and students eager to learn from her. 1 year later, on the anniversary of their impromptu wedding, Caio and Natalia stood in her garden, now expanded to become a teaching center for natural healing, watching Apollo grazing peacefully nearby. The magnificent horse had fully recovered, his golden coat gleaming in the sunlight. Happy anniversary, Mrs. Martinez, Caio said, slipping his arms around his wife's waist from behind, his hands coming to rest gently on her rounded belly. Their first child was due in just 2 months. Natalia leaned back against his chest, covering his hands with her own. Happy anniversary, Mr. Martinez. Any regrets? He asked softly. About how we ended up together. About the obstacles we faced. She turned in his arms to look up at him, her eyes shining with certainty. Not one. Everything that happened, even the hard parts, brought us here, to this perfect moment. As if agreeing, Apollo trotted over to nuzzle Natalia's shoulder affectionately, making them both laugh. He still adores you, Caio observed, stroking the horse's velvety nose. Smart horse. He knows what I've always known, Natalia replied, reaching up to touch her husband's face tenderly. That beneath all the trappings of wealth and position, you have the most beautiful soul. A soul worth saving. You did save me, Caio said, simply. You saved more than my horse that day in the field. You saved my heart, my future, everything that matters. As the afternoon sun bathed Green Valley Ranch in golden light, Caio and Natalia stood together, husband and wife, future parents, partners in every sense, surrounded by the life they had built together. A life founded not on wealth or social position, but on something far more valuable. Authentic love, mutual respect, and the courage to choose each other, day after day, no matter what the world might say. And nearby, Apollo watched over them, the living symbol of where their story began, with a simple act of kindness that had grown into a love strong enough to heal not just a horse, but 2 wounded hearts, an entire ranch, and a community that would never be the same again.